Comparing American issues today with those of the past, our group of researchers investigated what we believe to be the top 3 issues America currently faces: poverty, healthcare, and medical research funding, and the war on terror. We believe the issues of poverty, healthcare STEM, and Islamophobia terrorism are the most pressing issues in our country today. We interviewed Beth Hyland on the issue of poverty, Lisa Orenstein on healthcare and STEM, and Mahtav on Islamophobia and terrorism. By interviewing these 3 teachers, we aim to get an expert within our own community's opinion on these issues and further our own understanding on the issue.
Poverty is an issue in the United States because 13% of people living in America fall under the poverty line. Since the Great Depression, poverty in America has slowly become one of our nation's biggest problems, once again arising in 2008 with the recession. We do not want another stock market crash, putting our society into a dystopian era. This issue is important to focus on because of its complexity and large role it plays in the societal structure of our society.
In a way, there have been structures in place throughout, the history of societies and civilizations where there's stratification in wealth and in power and in privilege. We see evidence in our society of a huge disparity and a huge gap in wealth and a huge gap in access to the things that we know help to create wealth or to create access to wealth, like education, healthcare, the kind of ability to pursue what we consider call the American dream. The Seattle mayor's office taking a real active approach in addressing poverty, and in particular the homeless crisis in Seattle. I think in Seattle, there are organizations like Facing Homelessness, Mary's Place, the Peace for the Streets by Kids from the Streets, PSKS, Teen Feed, giving the challenges and identity of the people that are experiencing it rather than talking about it just sort of topically or philosophically from like just an economic standpoint or a political standpoint. Learn about and get to know people who that is their own experience and find where within that relationship of interaction there is a commonality and a common ground. And I think that that's one of the powerful things behind service.
Being a capitalist system when it comes to healthcare disproportionately affects lower and middle class citizens, and resources such as antibiotics and medicine are short in supply to the point where the cost of medication is already starting to inflate exorbitantly. While it seems like healthcare is not vital if we are not sick, there are many cases in which a lack of healthcare leads to other huge issues, such as poverty and unemployment. The lack of funding for science from the government hinders our ability to prevent infectious diseases around the world from spreading, such as Zika.
I think one of the issues that we have in this country with health is a debate that rages between people who feel that healthcare is a fundamental human right versus contingencies that don't feel that way. We rely on research to be funded by the government. We are debating the merits of the Affordable Care Act, and in the concept of repeal and replace, the replacement runs a very significant risk of cutting back on funds available for low-income folks to be able to access health care. But because our government doesn't sort of really play a role in that and isn't really prepared to manage a potential pandemic here. For me, personally, the best way to manage healthcare from an individual or population level is to recognize that healthcare is a basic human right, and every person living in this country should have access to healthcare, regardless of the cost, and that to set up a universal coverage plan that ensures everybody would be, in the end, to me, the most cost-effective way to manage healthcare in this country. It appears that the healthcare bill, as developed by the House, will leave 24 million people, approximately, uninsured. 24 million people who, on the current Affordable Care Act, would be covered.
Terrorism affects a large part of our community in different ways. In one way, those who are affected by terrorism could be those who are caught in an attack. Yet in another way, terrorism could relate to the social issue with the Iraq War in the 21st century. Terrorism can stem from international sites or domestic sites. There's a negative connotation in society that Islam has a connection with terrorism with the means of ISIS and other groups in the Middle East. Some American citizens have started judging people based off of their skin color in regards to immigration. Terrorism and Islamophobia can affect many people in our own neighborhoods, cities, and states.
I think terrorism is just, is an act of violence or acts of violence and terror designed to kind of disrupt and harm. I mean, I think it's an act of violence, and is like war, is like conflict, bloodshed, all of that is what I think of when I think of terrorism. Islamophobia is basically discriminatory thoughts and feelings towards people who are adherents of the religion of Islam and are Muslims. So viewpoints that are discriminatory, prejudice, oppressive. There's just the fact that we associate terrorism with a religion. I mean, no religion is inherently violent, but the fact that there's such an association with people who are adherents of a faith and to acts of violence that are committed by people who espouse, are terrorist extremists. When I look at the terrorism that's happening and the claims that people are making, whether they're being connected to some terrorist organization like ISIS or, what jumps out to me is that these are not in the name of, obviously we know they're not in the name of religion, these are tendencies of extremism. I love this expression that I hear often: if you want different results, you got to change your behavior. So we keep doing the same thing, expecting different results. I think one of the ways we address it is through meaningful engagement and relationships with people of different faiths, really seeking to understand and have conversations. You may not necessarily see eye to eye, but it takes just peeling the layers of the onion to see that, there's many things we have in common and things that we don't, and we don't see eye to eye. We still have a relationship, you and I, so you're not separate from me.
Hearing from our experts in the Overlay community sheds light on the depth of these issues. While their interviews have confirmed the adversities within these issues, they have also offered their own views on how we, as a community and as a country, can move forward and work together in combating these issues. We understand that there is no magic bullet to any of these disheartening issues, but there is a hope of a long-term solution and finding some holding on keeping our community together in spirit, in commerce, and in health.